Rally Mohawks. The whisper went around on December 16th, 1773. Boston Harbor is a teapot tonight. Everyone who heard the whisper looked out over the water. 3 British ships laden with 90,000 pounds of tea were riding peacefully at anchor. After the Boston Massacre, Parliament had repealed the Townshend Acts, except for the tax on tea. Tea was the only British product that the Americans still refused to buy. Their boycott had helped drive the British East India Company, which imported the tea, to the verge of bankruptcy. So the British Prime Minister, Lord North, had granted the British East India Company a monopoly on the American tea trade. If Americans had no other choice, he thought, they would give up and buy British tea. Americans were outraged. If Britain could grant a monopoly on tea, she could grant monopolies on everything the colonies needed. After a fiery protest meeting, a group of colonists dressed up as Indians. They disguised their faces with coal dust and paint, stuck feathers in their hats, and marched 2 by 2 down to the waterfront. At the wharf, they divided into 3 groups and boarded the tea ships. The sailors handed over the keys to the holds without a fight, and the Indians got to work. They hoisted the heavy chests of tea on deck, split each one open, and dumped the loose tea overboard. Then they slipped away. When the sun rose the next morning, piles of tea could be seen floating on the tide. This incident became known as the Boston Tea Party. A song about it was sung throughout the colonies. Rally, Mohawks, bring out your axes, and tell King George we'll pay no taxes on his foreign tea. Here's a picture of what it may have looked like as they're dressed up as Native Americans. Admiral John Montagu, the commander of the British warships anchored in the harbor, was spending the night in a house on the wharf. When the Indians began marching back to town, he opened his window and called, "Well, boys, you have had a fine, pleasant evening, but mind you'll have to pay the fiddler yet." An Indian yelled back, "Come down, squire, and we'll settle up in 2 minutes." The admiral slammed his window shut. As each Indian left the tea ships, a guard searched him to make sure he hadn't stolen any tea. One man had stuffed his pockets with tea leaves. The tea and the man's hat and wig was thrown into Boston Harbor. Interesting how they refused to actually even steal the tea. They specifically threw it into the harbor as a form of protest. Shows a lot of integrity there to not even steal any of the tea. The children of Boston, whose fathers came home very late with painted faces and feathers in their hats, always remembered the night of the Boston Tea Party. It was a wonderful story to tell their own children and grandchildren. The morning after the Boston Tea Party, men went out in small boats and beat the piles of tea down with paddles to make it unusable. And again, here we go. Notice, no one's stealing the tea. They're all just sort of trying to destroy the tea so that no one can use it. Pretty interesting that they really don't want anyone to use it, not even their fellow Bostonians.